Welcome to Charity Therapy, the podcast where we explore the ups and downs of the nonprofit sector and answer your burning questions. I'm your host, Jess Birken, owner of Birken Law Office, and I'm excited you're here. Imagine hanging out with me and my super smart, funny nonprofit expert pals. You get to ask them anything about your nitty-gritty nonprofit life and get their wisdom for free. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just strapping on your nonprofit boots, we're here to share stories and remind you you're not alone on this journey. So get ready to join the conversation and bring me the tough questions. I ain't scared. Ready to rock? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to this episode of Charity Therapy. Today I am joined by David Rhode. David is a nonprofit coach and author who helps nonprofit leaders solve problems and move in the right direction. So we have a bunch in common in that regard. Thanks for being here, David.
Jess, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah, it's awesome to have another person who just helps people solve problems. Like that's definitely like how I think of myself, rather than like legal. I'm like, nah, I'm just helping people solve a problem because we all have problems. So that's awesome. So I know that you have a lot of stuff out there about nonprofit leadership. And I kind of have one really broad question that I want to throw at you before we get started. And that's just like, if you could say one thing that you wish all aspiring nonprofit leaders knew, what would it be?
I would encourage them to have the perspective that you are running a business and you are not really sort of just into promoting a particular cause, that running a nonprofit organization is much bigger. It takes a lot more skills. And even though your passion and your commitment to a particular cause may be what's bringing you in to this moment of your professional journey, that if you're going to be successful in this role as a nonprofit leader, you're going to need to broaden your horizons and develop skills that are going to allow you to manage the entire organization.
I love that. And it may be different skills than you've used in other roles or other industries. Yeah, I love that. Okay, we have a listener question. I think it's a really juicy one, and there's a lot of meat on the bone here. Are you prepared to dive in?
Yes, I can't be more ready.
He was born ready. Okay, here we go. The listener writes, "Help! I am just starting a new job as an executive director, and it's a big increase in responsibility from my last role. One of my board members, though, is micromanaging every single thing I do, walking into my office, demanding to meet with me without appointments, showing up uninvited at my scheduled meetings with other board members or other nonprofit leaders, and generally treating me like his secretary. I need to make a change. But what do I do?" Oof, there's a lot to unpack here.
There is. This is a difficult problem. I mean, when we deal with board members and, board members and board engagement is a big part of the book. And we'll talk maybe about that separately. But, normally the problem is your board members aren't engaged enough. And in this situation, you have a totally different scenario. And so I would want to have a separate meeting with them. And I would really want to understand a number of things. Well, first of all, I'd want to thank them. I want to thank them for all their support. I want to thank them for their financial contributions to the organization. I want to have all that data behind me, how long they've been involved, any of their significant, personal accomplishments, things of that nature, their energy, and let them know that, normally the challenge for an executive director or for an organization in general is to have board members more engaged. And so I'd want to thank them. Now what I'd want to do is shift from that moment also and kind of give them a glimpse into my world and a glimpse into what our relationship might be. And there'd be a couple of caveats here. The first one is this a board member that you want to keep with the organization? If it is, then you're going to manage this meeting maybe differently than if this person's kind of a problem and there's not like a lot of positives and you're looking to maybe say, this is not the kind of person I want involved anyway. So I could be a little bit more maybe abrupt or direct or treat it differently than if it's somebody how I really need to cultivate and nurture. So I'm thinking about lots of things like making sure the board president or somebody else on the board, like what's their perspective on this board member? How do they feel about this individual? Are they even aware that this person is acting this way? Maybe they've always been this way. Or maybe there's a recent change. Maybe they've recently retired. They just have so much time on their hands and they don't know what to do with themselves. And sort of being involved with the organization is a good way for them to fill up their time. Okay, so I'd want to know those things kind of going in. But I would really want to share with them how managing my time is one of the key things for me being effective in my job. And I would want to let them know that I'm really open to them being involved in an important way in the work that we do, but I want it to be the right way. And what's been happening lately has really kind of gotten me off track, and it's been a bit of a disruption. And I know that it's probably something you're not intending, but that's really what's happening. So it's okay to sort of lay that out there in a way that's gentle, but also fair. Okay, so now we've established that.
This is where I can tell you're from the East Coast, because you go right to the direct communication solution.
This is nowhere near as direct as I'd want to be, Jess. I'm really trying to put my Minnesota nice right now.
I'm picking that up. I'm like, no, all the Minnesotan and Midwestern people are like, you just come right out and say what you think? No. But I love how you're modeling that you can do this in a gentle way. You can actually be direct and say, I'm feeling a little bit like maybe you don't have a lot of confidence in me. Is that what's going on here? Kind of being curious, or just sort of gently saying, I've noticed that this is happening and it's making me feel a certain way. I like that you modeled that you can actually be direct without being rude, that it's not rude to be direct, right? Because a lot of people need to know that.
Right. And I think it's okay to let them know that, when you ask the questions you ask, or when you kind of come into my office without an appointment, it's sort of like you don't have an appreciation for what my job involves. Would you like me to help you understand kind of? I might get a little bit more direct and say, I know there are probably other candidates for the job. Were you in support of me being hired for this role?
It's a fair question.
Maybe you had somebody else in mind, or was this a role that you were interested in personally? Because you could ask them, like, do you want to have a bigger role within the organization? Is that something you're looking for? And sometimes, pushing something at somebody will sort of force them to retreat. And I'm okay with that, because what's not acceptable is to continue the current thing.
100%.
You have a lot of options, and almost none of them, it feels like, could be worse than more of the same. So, I think that's the good news. The good news is we're not quite in the nowhere to go but up category, but it feels like we're approaching that. So I would ask them if they want to have a more structured role. And they might ask things like, well, what would that look like? And then you could think about, hopefully in advance and with the approval of other people within your organization, your team that you've brainstormed with a little bit. I mean, this is a problem child and you're trying to deal with the problem child. But is there something that can be done that's time consuming, that board members can play an effective role in? So the first thing that comes to mind potentially is, do they want to lead the development efforts of the organization? Do they want to be the head of the development committee for the board? Is that something they would be interested in entertaining? Assuming it's a role that's not really high performing right now.
Yeah.
Now, maybe something that's a little less threatening or a little less risky is, would they be interested in leading the donor stewardship efforts for the organization? So making phone calls, writing letters to donors, having a very specific set of tasks, which will actually take work off of either your plate or your development director's plate in a way that could be helpful. And it is completely appropriate for a board member to be in that role and thanking donors.
Yeah.
Something of that nature, please.
One thing that comes up for me with this is we're missing some of the key context here. Like, the listener doesn't say, they say, I started a new job as an executive director. Okay. Is it new to you, or is it new to the organization? Because this could be the organization's first executive director, in which case that board may be having some struggles transitioning from we're a roll up our sleeves working on in the trenches to like, okay, now we need to figure out how to move towards a governing board. So there could be some of that going on. There also could be, I worked at this organization as a program person, and now I have been promoted to an executive role. And maybe this board member is questioning my sort of chops to go from program to executive. And that just makes me think of the title of your book, right? Because program people are working in the organization. Typically, they're passionate about the mission. They're delivering the mission. The executive level folks are working on the organization using a different skill set. It could be that this board member is worried that this person is maybe too green or too new, or they're like somehow lacking confidence in this new executive director's ability to kind of operate on the organization. They might even think that they're helping get that person to the working on the organization level, but just going about it in a really weird way.
No, I love going back to and sort of just dissecting where the organization is in terms of their path. A lot of nonprofits start with either a part-time or completely volunteer leadership because they just can't afford a full-time professional in that role. So yeah, and as part of that, the initial boards are normally working boards where they have specific roles and they need to be involved in a different way because staff are not present in some of the ways that you might want them, down the road when the organization matures. So yeah, I think that context is vitally important. And if this is a moment where the organization is shifting from more of a working board to more of a governing board and a more professional leadership of the organization, then you can acknowledge, listen, it feels like the rules of the game have changed. And maybe they've changed for you specifically. And you can talk about that sometimes as unfair because you were used to maybe, I don't know what things were like before I was in this role because I wasn't here, or even though I was program director or whatever I wasn't, involved with you the same way that you might have been involved with the previous person. But yes, I think that context could matter because that could really underscore kind of how this has come about. But I would really want to make sure that they understand like what's happening now is not acceptable. And It's causing you to lose focus and to lose the ability to lead the organization effectively because people now are not sure. It feels to them like you might be undermining me. And it feels to me like maybe you don't have full confidence in me. And then you stop and you have to listen because you have to get them to talk. Because if you say you've lost confidence in me or this, they're going to either say, no, I actually think you're great. And just that and the other thing, that's great. Or you might say, well, no, I mean, I know you're new and I thought you might want some help and all those things. It's like, you know what? I really do need guidance. And I'm wondering if you'd be open to like a monthly call where you could kind of offer me your support and mentor me in a way that you think is helpful. But I really want to have my interactions with you moving forward be more structured. I will make time for you, but if you have questions or if you want to do something, it's important for me that you schedule time on my calendar the same way anybody else will. Board members always are a very high priority. So it's not like I'm going to make this difficult. But I don't like surprises. I want to be able to try to lead effectively and manage my schedule. And I think that that's just professional courtesy and professional respect. And I hope you can understand that I'm not trying to put you off. I'm really just trying to get the things done that are being asked of me. And if anybody else were doing the same things, I'd be having the same conversation with them.
Yeah. The thing you said in the beginning about asking the board member if this was a role they applied for is really insightful. I've had so many situations with clients where a board member wants to apply to become the executive director, and it's always very sticky. And I usually recommend that the board member be willing to resign their role on the board before they apply. Like, you want this so much that you're willing to just not be on the board anymore. Because the reality is, if that is the case, they didn't get it, but they wanted it. This is a premium example of how this can go badly for the new executive director. And this can contribute to like employment law issues and like, could get as far as like hostile workplace environment type stuff if it goes really far. But yeah, I just really like that everything you're saying is you have to address it. One way or another, you have to figure out a way to address it. What do you think about traditionally in corporate America? People talk about having like your sponsor or your patrons within the organization, people who are above you that look out for you and sort of are your allies. What do you think about that in a nonprofit context, that this executive director has a board mentor or someone that they are closer with that they could go to talk about this situation?
Yeah, that would clearly be a precursor to me having this one-on-one conversation is, whichever member of the board, A, it would be the board president, and B, it would be the person that I'm closest to on the board. Hopefully, I mean, maybe they're the same person, maybe they're two different people. And if it's two different people, then I'd potentially have them on the same call saying, I'm really running into a challenging situation. And I would love for them to try to intervene a little bit on my behalf and invite them to do so. Like, can you see if this is kind of a conversation you'd be willing to have with whomever there feels like, and I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but it feels like there might be also a male-female element to this. Treating me like a secretary was their words, which maybe implies that the leader is female and the board member is male. And there are some times I've observed where
100%. Yeah.
That can be an underlying, could be generational, could be a lot of things, right? So, we have to be open to the fact that sometimes people act a certain way, not because they're trying to offend or this, that, and the other. Maybe it's just what they're used to. That doesn't always make it right, but at least we have to have that in mind, that this person just may function this way. That could involve the language they use and the way they go about things and the way they're used to saying, can you get me a cup of coffee? Can you do this? Can you do that? When this is not Mad Men. This is not that. This is 50s. This is 2025. What are we doing
here?
Not
Mad Men, folks. Yeah. No, 100%. Right? How about the idea that this person is really like stepping up? Like this is a career move for them. They are making a step from not an executive director position to an executive director position. Of course, the first thing I think of is I got a master's in nonprofit management. I went to school with a lot of folks who were like, I'm working in this role. I'm getting this master's because I want to move up the ladder. Let's just assume that this person did not go get a master's business degree or anything like that. What would you advise somebody who is kind of putting themselves out there into this new role? Because I'm thinking maybe even demonstrating to the board that yes, I may have been promoted from a lower position, but I'm doing all of the things to level myself up. Like I'm reading David's book. I'm reading other things. I'm taking some courses, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think a professional development plan or skills development plan is important. I think it's also important to have some relationships outside of the current organization. And what I would encourage this person to do, and there's a whole chapter on advice for new leaders at the end of Passion Isn't Enough, which is, this notion of forming your own cohort. Like you've got to find a few other nonprofit leaders, maybe in your community or in your sector, or somebody meet at a conference or all the things, and have coffee with them every so often, or virtual coffee, or whatever's reasonable. And sometimes just scenario playing these problems and challenges off against them will be just somebody you can talk to. I love the fact that this is charity therapy, but like many of my coaching sessions, I feel like are at least 50% therapy, where they just need somebody to talk to. They need to pour this out, and you need to listen without judgment and say, that sounds really challenging. And then maybe do the old, what are you thinking about doing about it? But they really just want somebody to listen. And it's hard for them to take this problem to staff, because that's really not our role. You don't want to talk out of school that way. Maybe they don't have somebody at home that's going to understand their work situation. So I really feel like having this small cohort of other leaders really might be helpful for them, so that they can have some people to go to and share in a judgment-free way. And if the organization feels like, because they're relatively new, that there are some opportunities for them to develop, then that's a whole development plan. And that's probably something I would have explored before I said yes to the job. But, what resources are available for me to go to conferences or to do certain things? Not like I'm looking to spend a ton of money, but I'm also knowing that the best ideas are normally out there, not within our four walls. And so I would want to make sure I had the support of the organization to kind of identify and then fill in the gaps as we collectively see fit. And there may be opportunities for the board also. Maybe the board needs training and support in a way that would be really helpful if it's transitioning from a working board to a governing board,
100%.
Understanding how they could be trained and their expanded role maybe in fundraising or attracting other resources. So, all of these things are sort of fair conversations. I don't know that they solve this proximate problem that was raised about the individual who's got the person like in their face. I'm also, I think I'm going to go the East Coast on you here, though. I'm still going back to this notion that, this person feels to me a little bit like they're being bullied. And sometimes when you are being bullied, you have to punch the bully in the nose. And so I do think there's this notion of confronting them in a professional way, but confronting them directly. Like, when you do these things, it makes me feel like you don't trust me in this role.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that to hurt your feelings. I'm just telling you that because as a professional, I care about what I do, and I'm fully committed to my success and this organization's success. And what I don't want is anybody who doesn't feel that way as part of the team. That's not a culture that I'm looking to build here. And so, it's okay to just kind of say, like, I'm in charge.
Yes.
And I'm also here to support the board. If the board has directives or initiatives or ideas, let's collaborate and let's figure those out. Let's decide them together. And then it's my job as a leader of the staff to figure out the best way to kind of make those happen in reality.
Yes. So, if you're listening to this and you needed that speech, I want you to rewind 1 minute and listen to David say that exact thing again, because that's your script right there. That is such a great script that you can riff on for your situation. And then you have your patron on the board, your close person, maybe follow up, but fight your own battles because you are the leader, right? I do love that. And I am from east of the Mississippi, just barely, having been raised in Milwaukee on the shores of Lake Michigan. So I don't really fit in Minnesota because I'm like very direct.
Hey,
100%.
I spent 6 years in Wisconsin. I was in Door County for 6 years.
Very nice.
I have a big cheese head,
there you go.
Old fashioned, cherry pie kind of thing running through me.
Love it.
I'm just saying, like, I think one of the things we have to do as leaders is be willing to lead and be willing to stand up. And, we're going to be in uncomfortable situations. This is an uncomfortable position to be in, to confront a board member who effectively is your boss in some ways, and to tell them that they're acting and they're behaving kind of out of line. So I do think a lot of preparation is involved. And frankly, 2025, you can have a chat GPT, conversation about how do you think I should handle this? And you can role play with chat GPT.
Oh,
you can ask some of these questions.
Brilliant.
And you can kind of like practice. I think you need to practice what you're going to say. I think you need to be pretty scripted because you want to get it right. And sometimes when we get into a more stressful situation, we might get off script or get off message.
Yes.
And I think if this is really important, you have to treat it as really important and you have to prepare for it that way.
Yeah. And literally like practice out loud, because a lot of times we have an idea of what we're going to say in our head. And then when it starts to come out, words are hard and, people sort of fall apart in that moment. And so literally like look at yourself in the mirror and practice like having the conversation, talk out loud to your ChatGPT app. Like, absolutely love that recommendation. David, you're amazing. Did I hear you say that you are also coaching people one-on-one?
Yeah, I do. I do CEO mentoring and coaching through my consultancy, which is called .org. People can find me at .org.com.
Awesome.
I love to coach nonprofit leaders.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you heard that, folks. So if this is you and you're staring in your bathroom mirror, like trying to get up the chutzpah to like talk to this person, you can call David. We like dropped a whole bunch of value bombs and I want to make sure I like kind of summarize some of these takeaways. So first of all the way back at the beginning, you said express gratitude for the board's volunteer service. And I want to make sure that I highlight that as a key thing because board members don't have to be there. And sometimes we don't want them there. And sometimes it would feel easier if they just weren't there at all. But we do need them and they are useful. And it is important to have gratitude for the work that they're doing because they are volunteering. I also heard you say that doing more of the same is rarely the right answer. And I think that's a really important takeaway because sometimes people get stuck in these like doom loops where they don't set themselves up to actually change anything. So if you just find yourself verbally ventilating about it and not making any change, remember that doing more of the same is rarely the right answer. Also, like if you're new, it's okay to show the board that you're leveling up your skills. It's okay to, if they didn't pre-plan for this, to ask for a professional development plan, to do those things. And I also like that you said when you're in sort of a tight spot with a board member that you want to be listening, right? A lot of times we get caught up in our head and we are sort of like thinking about everything and assuming what this person's motivation is, but actually getting curious and trying to listen and hear what is the tone? Are they actually just trying to help me? Do they have no confidence? Did they actually want this job? Right? Try and get curious and listen to figure out what their angle is before you pop off. And then I think one of the most important things you brought up that I absolutely love and am a huge fan of is finding your own small group, your own cohort, your own mastermind. Get that book, read that chapter, because that is so important It's lonely being an executive director. I think your coaching practice and my law practice are very similar. Sometimes clients just need therapy because there is no one to talk to. As you said, you're stuck in the middle. And so finding your peers that can commiserate with you about the particular struggles of being a nonprofit leader is so key to your sanity and to your success. Anything else you think I missed?
No, I think you covered it beautifully. I just think you need to stand up for yourself. I think you need to, kind of establish your turf, mark your territory a little bit, and make sure that if you're not going to do this, it's going to get worse, not better.
100%. 100%.
So, this is called take your medicine now and maybe get uncomfortable now, because you don't want this to continue on, because making this continue on is just going to make your job harder.
Yes.
And potentially just make you miserable and make you look for another opportunity somewhere else, which obviously you've made a huge commitment to stepping up into this role and you want to be successful.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for being here. Will you tell us your coaching website one more time? And then I know we can get your book on Amazon. Tell us your website, though, one more time.
Sure. The website is .org.com, .org.com. That's great. People can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's David Rhode, Rhode. Find me easily that way. And the book Passion Isn't Enough, a practical guide for nonprofit leaders. I talk about it a lot on LinkedIn. It's available anywhere books are sold online. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Goodreads, places like that. So I'd love to have nonprofit leaders tell me what they think of the book. The feedback's been incredible so far. And different people are taking away different things based on where they are within their organization and within their leadership journey. So it's been great and it's been so much fun.
That's awesome. Thank you. And there's such a shortage of great content for nonprofit leaders. I love that you're putting that into the space because it just is super needed. So thank you again for being here, folks. If you enjoyed this episode, if you know someone who's being made to feel like a secretary by their micromanaging board member, please, please, please share this episode with them. Get them David's advice stat. Rate, review, subscribe in your podcast app. It really does help out the show. If you have a wild story to share, please get at me. I am happy to keep your name and organization name out of it. It's always anonymous. And thanks again for listening.